Assalamu alaikum. And of course, assalamu alaikum, as Jesus, peace be upon him, would have said in that beloved land of Palestine. Today, it's going to be a real hot podcast, and I really want everybody to focus on today's show. There's so much to talk about, so much to catch up about. And of course, joining me is my co host, Brother Yusuf. Brother Yusuf, assalamu alaikum. How you doing, my dear brother?
Walaikum salam, my dear brother, and peace and greetings on all those out there, both our Christian and Jewish friends who support this. And of course, those out there who are antagonistic towards us, we wish you greetings of peace. It's been some time since we last chatted, and quite a bit has happened. Quite a bit has happened over the past couple of weeks, as you know, this conflict is such that on a daily basis, killings, massacres, murders, new reports coming out, new incidents that are happening, unheard of in human history. It's the first time that we've seen genocide live streamed in real time. And so it's important to keep up to date with some of the latest information that comes out there. And it's quite crucial to educate those, because we at the same time are confronting the pro-Israeli propagandists who have captured the corporate mainstream media. But I think one of the things that is optimistic at this particular point in time is that this is the very first time, as I've mentioned on numerous previous podcasts, this is the very first time in human history where the pro-Israeli lobbyists that generally control mainstream media and have generally basically influenced public opinion have not won. From a propagandist point of view, the Israeli, the pro-Zionist entity has totally lost, because the world has now seen, and Israel essentially has become basically a pariah in the entire world. And so, when you have a situation, about a month or so ago, where Amnesty International, for example, welcomed the report of this phenomenal tour de force, who I would call this Boudicca, this UN Special Rapporteur, Francesca Albanese, who we hopefully wish to get on this program sometime in the future. She basically did a remarkable piece where she presented, I think sometime in October last month, a kind of a special report on the actual situation within the Palestinian occupied territories, that's on the West Bank, in the Gaza Strip, and the actual violence that has essentially been unleashed against the Palestinians ever since the 7th of October. The way she systematically unpacks it, in the sense that what we are seeing is part and parcel of a long-term, intentional, systematic, state-organized, forced displacement and replacement of the Palestinians. And of course, the trajectory risks that are basically causing this kind of irreparable prejudice to the very existence of the Palestinian people. That's now in the public. That's open. It's so devastating that I haven't seen a report. I mean, I go back to the Goldstone report, which Judge Richard Goldstone in 2010, he overturned. He then backtracked. I haven't seen something more devastating. I think one thing I may add also, which maybe people are not aware of, or some may not know, is that if you recall, in the beginning of this year, we had a situation where the South African government, by a remarkable legal team, two of whom were my personal lecturers, they actually took Israel to the International Court of Justice. And they had, we discussed at length the 96-page application, which we discussed in the program. On the 28th of October, and it hasn't been made to the public, but I've seen it myself, South Africa filed its memorial to the ICJ in its application. And of course, in accordance with the rules of the court, that memorial, I haven't had full sight of it, but I've seen extracts of it, but that memorial may not be made public. And the memorial, that's basically what it's called. It's the name of the document that is recording the main case of South Africa against Israel, contains evidence which shows how the government of Israel has violated the Genocide Convention by, of course, promoting the destruction of the Palestinians. The one remarkable thing about this is that that memorial itself is 750 pages. And that document is supported by exhibits and annexes of over 4,500 pages. That's a memorial. That's South Africa's memorial. That's a reminder to the global community to remember the Palestinian people, to stand in solidarity with them against this kind of catastrophe. And I don't think, in line of what we saw in February, when we saw this kind of pathetic response by the Israeli legal team when they attempted to refute and rebut the averments made by the South African government in its devastating presentation to the ICJ, I don't think that the Israeli government or the Israeli regime, that this illegitimate regime can muster up a legal team that can provide that kind of rebuttal or refutation against this inherently devastating analysis. I'll try and probably during the course of the stream post the pics and the images of that. But I was gobsmacked that the 4,000-page exhibits and annexes, it filled the back of a bakkie, a little kumbi. That's how much you had. And it was accompanied by the main primary text document, which is called the memorial, which is the systematic evidence that is being presented in order to justify and prove its case of genocide to the ICJ, which the ICJ has already agreed to as the fact that the South African government has made out a plausible case. They've established a prima facie case. So that's something that the South African government has done. Kudos to them. I'm not a supporter of the ANC government, but the legal team has been second to none. And if there's one thing that the South African government has done in 30 years since democracy, take into account our failings and our dislocation and dysfunctionality as a nation on other levels and in aspects of corruption, this would be one thing. This would be one thing that I would give them credit with. And to a certain extent, even the ordinary critics of the South African government have been somewhat measured in their general critique against the ANC since this bold step that has been taken and adopted by South Africa. So let's basically hope that that momentum continues.
Absolutely.
Because you are aware that we've had our new elections as a government of national unity, where the ANC has merged with the official opposition called the Democratic Alliance, which has historically been kind of on the fence, but has had a number of pro-Israeli supporters within the auspices of the Democratic Alliance. It's the kind of equivalent, I would say, of something like your Labour Party, with all the frills and fancies, but still somehow or the other supportive, at the very least, of the Israeli regime. So they've merged with the ANC government. So let's just see how the outcome goes. But, this is basically a message to the world out there that the international community cannot stand idly by whilst innocent civilians, women, children, hospital workers, humanitarian aid workers, journalists are killed for simply being. And this is not carpet bombing. This is not just simply carpet bombing or strikes. We've now seen, as we've shown over the several months, where they are shot dead in the head, systematically targeted. We've had reports, we've shown doctors, we've had witnesses confirming that. So it's a deliberate, systematic mass murder, deliberate, intentional, not accidental killing, not even collateral damage. They're not even making any qualms about it. If you recall the very first time we discussed, you and I, Mohammed, the Al Ahliya hospital bombing, there was a massive global outrage, and Israel attempted to suggest that, look, this may have been a Hezbollah rocket, and we would never target a hospital. Well, look at them now. How many hospitals they have targeted, and they don't even make a shame about it. They're no longer ashamed. They've reached a level of such impunity that the scoundrel nation, the systematic nation of illegitimates, are no longer ashamed of the fact that they are continuously shredding international law, imperiled the institutions of global governments that were, established to hold these states accountable. And the powers that be, your government, your corrupt government, and the United States and other countries in Europe simply go about and allow it to continue its apartheid and settler colonialism.
Absolutely. Yusuf, we have to really get our guest speaker on.
Indeed,
we've got a very special individual joining us, somebody who's very senior within the Workers' Party of Britain. He's backstage. I'll be adding him onto the main stage now. Welcome to the show. Oops, he's just dropped out. Hopefully his battery should be okay. Hopefully he'll be back, but the special guest should be joining us hopefully soon. Wa alaikum salam to so many people already in the chat. Really appreciate that. Not a problem, Yusuf. I just seen the message. But we have got a live poll. As you can see, the question is, will Trump stop the war in Gaza? So far, 15 people have voted. 13% have said yes. 87% have said no. Haz is back. Haz, I'll be adding you onto the screen now. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us, Haz. Just briefly introduce yourself, and did you hear what Brother Yusuf just mentioned, or anything that you also would like to add? Feel free to speak.
I just want to say that, first of all, Yusuf has set the stage very nicely for everything that's happening in Gaza, specifically the targeting of individuals because they're either medical staff or they are journalists or anything that is there to report and help people is being systematically destroyed by this government of Israel. The Israeli security forces have been unable to shut down Hamas, and because they're unable to do that, they're trying to shut down. Mike is muted. Can you hear me? You can hear me. Okay. So the journalists are giving the truth out of Gaza, and the truth coming out of Gaza is that that atrocity after atrocity is taking place, and also they're killing people who are the Israeli soldiers. So this, because the IDF before this conflict had this veneer of superiority and power, and is able to do whatever it wants. They've won so many wars. They may have done that in the 60s and 70s, but this IDF is not that IDF. And yesterday, for instance, in northern Gaza, 4 of them were killed. Four IDF soldiers were killed. And they don't want people reporting. So what they're doing is, and what they're doing in Lebanon is, they are systematically killing as many journalists as they can. More journalists have died in this conflict in 402 days than in any other conflict in the history of time, in the history of mankind. So this is the Israel's, that's the medal that they can pin to their chest, that they killed journalists. The amount of doctors they've abducted and murdered, the amount of nurses and fire start, the fire brigade people, the civil service, the ones who go to get people out the rubble, they're intentionally targeting those people. Nurses are getting killed, doctors are getting taken away and killed and tortured or released in so badly messed up physically that it's sickening to look at the picture of them before and after. That's what Israel is doing. It's not a sane society. I would suggest that they're a psychopathic society, and they're a society that needs to come to an end, in the sense that it can't carry on being the way it is. It's not normal. It's not normal human behavior to take pleasure in the killing of children. There was a study that was done where they worked out that the majority of the between the age of 5 and 9, so 5-year-old to 9-year-old, is the target audience for killing children. Now, why would you do that? Why would you pick that age group? Because you don't care. You're not making any kind of effort. And we know that they can do precision bombing. We know that they took out the martyr Ismail Haniyeh with one missile through one window. So then we know what they're capable of. So when they're dropping 2,000-pound bombs on Gaza, the intention is to murder people. The intention is to scare people. The intention is to get people to move away from where they are. And they've moved the Gazans from the north to the middle. And some of the people in the north didn't leave because they knew that if they left, they'd never be allowed back. But they are telling people to go from one place to a safe place, but they're bombing the safe place at the same time as they're bombing the other places. So there are no safe spaces. There are no safe places for the people of Gaza. So that is the situation that needs to be looked into as part of the war crime tribunal that's taking place, And every day another war crime is coming up. And every single day children are getting killed. Yesterday was a massacre of 57 people in tents. And they killed men, women, and children. And they're not Hamas. So Yusuf put it a lot better than I did. And I can just say that I'm worried about what's going to happen to North Gaza. North Gaza right now is the biggest single issue because the Palestinians there have made a point of saying, we're not leaving. You're going to have to kill us. And the Israelis are killing them. And there's very few reporters left. Anas is left. Hassam is left. I think those are the two that I know. They're young men who have ended up becoming journalists. Anas works for Al Jazeera. Hassam works as an independent. And you know, Hassam, not 2 days ago, 3 days ago, had to bury 11 of his cousins. 11 of his own cousins he had to bury. He saw his aunt who didn't know what had happened, and he had to stay strong for her while seeing that it was the people that were killed were his own family, his own direct cousins. And then their mother, the mother of 11 children who've all been killed, is sitting there. That's her life, hitting herself on her head. That's the existence she's got left. We live in a very cruel world when my government, the British government, which is not a government that I support, is absolutely complicit with everything that's going on. They've done nothing but give political cover, financial cover, military cover to the genociders. We are stained with the souls of every person that's dead over there as the British people. We are stained by that. That's literally, I don't know how else to say it. It is a stain on my soul that I'm unable to do anything other than sit there, watch, get onto Twitter, get onto other social media platforms and call people to account. But it's not doing anything. It's not stopping anything. The killing has not stopped, is all I can say. With all of my efforts, marching, whenever there's a Palestinian march in London or everywhere else that we can get to, we scream from the bottom of our, hearts, from the top of our lungs. And it still means nothing because we've got a government made up of Israeli first politicians. They look to see, if I take this decision, who will be the person that will benefit, who will not benefit. If it doesn't benefit Israel, and if it doesn't benefit their stand with Israel, then guess what? They will not take the action. So therefore, they've abdicated their authority to a foreign state that is acting in a genocidal manner towards a population of people who have been suffering for 76 years, a brutal occupation, a brutal siege since 2005 or 6 in Gaza, without respite. And when they turned around and went up to, in 2018, the Palestinian people in Gaza did a walk to freedom or something, where they literally just walked up to the fences to say, let us out. No firearms, no nothing. And the Israelis got 500 snipers, 300 snipers, some ridiculous amount of snipers, lined them up, and they made a point of maiming people, turning them into handicaps, into paraplegics, like, shooting like forearms, the arms and legs of the targets they're going for. Two kids, and I'm talking about like 9 or 10-year-olds, took a bullet in the eye. That's the kind of cruelty. And, for them to throw a rock from inside the fence to reach the soldiers is a physical impossibility. So there is no threat or danger. But the Israelis made the point of murdering these people, maiming these people. And they made sure that they killed a nurse. Why? Because she was helping other people. To teach a lesson to not do that. They targeted press. Everything that you're seeing now has already been happened before. This is the psychopathic people that are running this country. And the thing is this, Israel's majority, believe in this project. They are happy that this is happening. It's not like, 50-50. The statistics are 85 to 90% want what's happening to Gaza to continue. They want the Palestinians displaced, murdered, and whatever else. And now that we've got Donald Trump come in, it looks like the West Bank is going to get annexed because he's picked Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee has already said there is no such place as the West Bank. It's called Judea and Samaria. He says those aren't outposts of of Israel. Those are the communities of Israel. Words are so important. Words are the most important thing. Now, this guy is the ambassador of the United States to the state of Israel. And that's what he has said in the past about the West Bank. It doesn't exist as a separate entity to the state of Israel. It is a province called Judea and Samaria. This is the systematic eradication of the Palestinian people. But the good thing is this, a Palestinian people, as Yasser Arafat said, are not going to go into history books as the people who went quietly. They are not going to go quietly into the night. They're fighting back, and they will keep fighting back. And I don't believe that the resistance, which is made up of all the other countries around there, apart from Jordan and Egypt, are not going to allow that to happen either. There are things that are going to happen because Iran was attacked. So there's an attack coming to Israel from Iran, a third wave as it's called. When that comes, it should do a shit ton of damage. Sorry about swearing, sorry. But it's going to do a lot of damage to the Israeli, military. And it's going to hopefully make them understand the consequences of attacking Iran and attacking the resistance. So with all of that said, I'm hoping, and I do still have faith in the fact that I believe the people of Gaza are going to make it through this. I know that the West Bank is going to make it. And I know that the Israelis in Lebanon cannot take more than 500 meters to 1,000 meters, put a flag up, take a video and a picture, and run back before they get missiles shot at them. That is the extent of it. Israel has got this, the army is made up of cowards, and the cowards only shoot with long distance things. They will never engage with people in hand to hand. They've been invited. Tfaddal, as they say. Come to Lebanon. You know how they say, come to Dubai. Yeah, the Lebanese say,
Ahlan wa sahlan. Marhaba.
Ahlan wa sahlan. Come to Lebanon and see what happens to you. And the consequences of that is that they're paying in blood, and they're not getting any lands. They're not taking anything. And the whole point of the project in Lebanon was what? It was to bring the peace and security so that the people in the northern part of the occupied Palestine can go back to their homes in Shalom and Malom, whatever the hell they're called. None of them are going back. And not only that, but northern Haifa is now getting bombed. But something you need to realize as well that Israel understands. It has not attacked the infrastructure of Lebanon. It has not attacked the infrastructure of Lebanon. Do you know why? Because Lebanon has said, whatever you do to us, we will do to you. So if they start attacking power stations in Lebanon, if they start attacking ports in Lebanon, the exact same thing's going to happen to them. And guess what? They've got very small amounts of resilience in their capacity to be able to produce electricity for their oil refineries, for any of their stuff. It is a tiny piece of land. A tiny piece of land. So I don't know where we're going. All I know is that Bibi Netanyahu is not going to go where he thinks he's going to go. He is caught in a cycle now where he can't back down. And the only final solution for all of this is that Israel needs to stop being what it is. It needs to stop being the genocidal country that it is. And it needs to be brought to heel through power, through Actual military power is the only way that Israel's going to stop, because there's no point trying to reason with it, because the people you're trying to reason with are not normal people. They are not sane people. Those people are the ones who have committed this genocide, and they have not stopped committing it, and they have no intention of stopping it. And every day is just another day to them. We're in day 402 of this, and they are still murdering children. Yesterday, they murdered 57 people, and they were in tents that were caught on fire from 2,000-pound bombs. I'm going to land it and be quiet there. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Horst. I wanted to ask you a question because certainly from the South African perspective, we don't seem to have as much censorship as I'm seeing in European society, and particularly in Europe and in your country, the United Kingdom. What is your, I mean, as part of the Workers' Party for Britain, what we understand what the United Kingdom government, both the Labour and the Conservative, stands for, and this has been known for a number of years. What's the mood on the ground? And are people, in fact, conscientized, not just by social media, but do they have access to, for example, news items and news reports by Al Jazeera? Because I see some of the kind of enraged froth that emanates from channels like GB News, Talk TV, people like, I think, this lady Julia Hartley, and this character called James Whale running a clown show and so on. But what is concerning to me is the arrests that are being imposed. I mean, we had just, I think, 9 days ago, Professor, I think, Haim Brashith, who is an Israeli, a British Israeli academic. He was giving a pro-Palestine, he was giving a speech at a pro-Palestinian march. He's from an organization called Jewish Network for Palestine. He was arrested. We know of a case which, Brother Muhammad brought to my attention, and I did up about 2 ladies that were targeted for apparently attempting to stand up to these UK arms companies. We had the case of this well-known journalist who we're trying to get in this program, Asa Stanley, from the Electronic Intifada, that's been arrested. It seems to me that there's a fascistic element that you cannot say things, cannot speak out, cannot condemn genocide for fear of being possibly targeted as either an anti-Semite, as a hate monger, and possibly a threat to the state. Just unpack that for me, because as a South African, I find that hard to decipher in light of the fact that we come out of that very same dispensation during the heights of apartheid.
Okay, first of all, this government is not in any way representative of the feelings of the country. 70% of the people in this country, and that's more than 50%, and bear in mind this country is made up of 85% white people. 70% of it are not happy with what's happening with the genocide. We see everything on social media. We don't see anything on TV. We don't see anything in Sky News. They don't report any of this stuff, because almost all of those things are invariably towing the line for the government of Britain. That's what they're doing, okay? No one who is a serious human being believes a word that comes out of the BBC, Channel 4. I've actually boycotted Channel 4 since I said I'm going to listen to them for a few days, and I just listened to them, and I just realized these guys are just literally parroting whatever suits the British government, and they are an organ of propaganda for the state. And they're not alone. All of the mainstream media are doing exactly that. Now, that is reflected in the fact that in Holland, we had a situation where Israeli terrorists, IDF members, who are part of this football hooligan group, go to Holland, smash the place up. They then get beaten up, rightly so, because people have a right to defend themselves. And one of the Sky News reports from Holland reports truthfully what happens. And then what do? That report is then pulled by Sky News.
Next day,
and they change it and add bits to it and whatever else. And then you've got the parroting of all government leaders, not just Britain, but all of them going along the lines of, I can't believe the level of anti-Semitism that has been shown to Israelis in Holland. And it's like a machine, a propaganda machine that is basically creating the narrative, and they just do as they're told, including David Lammy, our foreign secretary,
Yeah.
our prime minister, the prime minister of Holland, and this, that, and the other. All of them exactly the same thing. American politicians using exactly the same kind of wording. But I want to get to Asa Winstanley, to Sarah Wilkinson, to Richard Medhurst. All three of these people are close personal friends of mine. All of them are in my phone and are people that I speak to. And every single one of them has been fired up by the fact that this has happened. What they want to do, and it's the MI5, MI6 special branch, whatever the hell it is, that's arrested them for the anti-terror, and almost all of them are under Section 12 of the anti-terrorism rules and regulations, which carry hefty sentences, yeah? And you don't have a lot of rights to them, as to those, to the law, like lawyers and this, that, and the other. They can keep you for 7 days without letting anyone know that you've been arrested. Now, and it's happened to a few other people as well, but they've done it to people thinking to them, I don't know what they're thinking actually, because it's idiotic, because you're picking on people who have got the hearts of a lion, because those of us who are activism, political people, are standing there calling a spade, calling Israel a genocidal country. We're not scared of this kind of intimidation. Our journalism and our people are not going to stop. I'll give you an example. I was on Politics Live on BBC Two during the elections. I was supposed to be there for 5 minutes as an interview, one-to-one with Joe. And then after that, I'm supposed to be part of a panel for another 10 minutes where we discuss what the Workers' Party is about. And, and then they get an opportunity as Labour, Tories and whatever else to basically argue with the points that I've made. At 4 minutes, they said to me, do you want Labour to win? I said, no, I don't want Labour to win. So you want the Tories to win? I said, I don't want Labour or Tories to win. I think they're as bad as each other. I said, one government is presiding over a genocide. The other one is looking to continue a genocide. And I swear to God, someone clipped a video. 30 seconds after I finished saying the word genocide, I was removed from the TV show that was supposed to be there for 15 minutes. And the producer says to me, thank you, Mr. Shafi. And his words were, that's the last time you're on Politics Live.
Wow.
So,
but the irony, Hos, is that despite all of that, there's two aspects of the question. One, do you not see a slight shift from mainstream like BBC and Sky compared to what it was some years back? Because the far right media like GB News and Talk TV and all these other kind of gutter level journalists actually criticize the BBC for being too pro-Palestinians, like kind of an inversion of reality that we see in real time. I mean, you couldn't make this up.
You got to bear in mind that GB News and Talk TV have got a specific audience. That target audience wants to hear that kind of stuff. The people that listen and watch that kind of TV program are the kind of people who are proper Islamophobes. They don't like anyone other than most probably white people and European white people. They are racist to the core. And you've only got to see the kind of people they bring on, and then they try to abuse them. And that's all they do. They don't sit there and have a conversation in peace with these people. But the BBC, Sky, and all them, they are a nuanced propaganda machine. GB is in your face, anti everything that's humanity. So is Talk TV. They literally don't care, and they are working for the right wing of the UK society. And it's not even UK society.
Are they popular or just popular amongst a certain fringe element in the UK? Because they appear on our feeds in South Africa quite regularly on YouTube for some bizarre reason.
Well, that's all to do with algorithms and to do with wanting to create a certain narrative. And it's literally a press of a button which way you want this stuff to appear or not to appear. And a lot of that also depends on the kind of person that you are. If you end up watching, for instance, if you like watching fights take place between two people, your feed will get filled up with that. If you want to see how racist certain people are in Britain, and you start watching that, that's what you end up seeing a lot of, because that's just, you know, their attitude is it's just about driving revenue in the direction they need it to go. So I wouldn't blame anyone other than your own people who are using these things. It's not like because South Africa is a world away from Britain, and South Africa is the country that went through apartheid and overcame apartheid and is now a nation in good standing with planet Earth and humanity, specifically because they've had the courage to take Israel to the International Criminal Court. There are not many countries that would do that because everyone is scared of the power of Israel. And it's obvious to the world now how much power Israel has. It's obvious to anyone who's looking at it that they control the United States of America. Whatever they want, the Americans just do it. Whatever they want, the British do it. Our government and our people are in complete disconnect with the power systems that the Israelis have control over. We don't have any kind of control over what's going on. And it is frightening that 98% of the APAC, representatives were brought into, won their seats. The APAC spent £100 million or $100 million to win 300 plus seats, Democrat and Republican, and they sit there and go on about how much the power they've got, and yet they blame the Iranians in interference, Russians in interference, but no one's willing to talk about Israeli interference. No one's talking about how they control what happens. The fact that in Britain, nearly, I don't know, they've got 400 odd members of parliament. More than half of those are Labour friends of Israel. The Tory party is a higher percentage. What's Conservative friends of Israel? They own our politicians, whether it's through Epstein files, whether it's through, I don't know what else they've got. I mean, they've obviously got a mechanism by which you do them a good job, you do them a solid, like Nick Clegg did, and then you get to become the director of X, Y, and Z at Facebook for life, getting paid millions of pounds. And it's a cycle that these people have got of power that stays within a certain area, and they're the ones in charge of it.
Yeah, I mean, what is amazing, and I mean, taking into account the thuggery and real, the kind of savage brutality that happened in Amsterdam just a couple of days back, last week, Thursday or Wednesday, when Maccabi Haifa played Ajax Amsterdam. I remember as a kid, we used to watch, and I mean, I'm talking I don't know if you recall Italia 90 and France 98. I was in school, and I recall the kind of football hooliganism culture that was kind of associated with England in Europe. I mean, when I remember I was about 9 or 10 years old, when Germany beat England in the Italian 90 semi-finals, and of course there was the football hooliganism of English hooligans, breaking German engineered vehicles in the streets of Milan and so on and so forth. But what I find systematically is that you then had a situation that the United Kingdom government, the British government, the sensibilities of society came out and basically condemned this as a kind of an aberration that is not truly reflective of, for example, English society or English culture for that particular manner. What it seems now is we've reached such a stage of kind of moral dislocation that how is it possible that hooliganist, thuggish, criminal gangs who are openly criminal in their behavior and are essentially accompanying the Israeli team and are official fans of the Israeli team, and their hooliganism is well documented by UEFA, by FIFA over the past several years. You have a kind of a moral duplicity where, whilst the traditional hooliganism culture has always been condemned, you have a situation that the Israeli hooliganism, these people, these thugs, not only find themselves embraced by Western leaders, but essentially find themselves as being treated as victims when they parade the worst anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab, anti-Muslim bigotry and their glorification of genocide in European cities. I mean, I know, there's going to be a forthcoming match tomorrow night, I believe, in Paris, in what you call, I believe, the UEFA Nations League. It's a match between Israel and France, apparently, I believe, at the the Saint-Denis, at the Stade de France tomorrow, and they are talking that clashes could be predictable. But what I see the reports is that there's a concern about the rise of anti-Semitism. I mean, you couldn't make this up. What this seems to demonstrate to me is that whilst in every single nation criminality is condemned, your UK government would have, for example, come out, your UK press would condemn the English savages that would trash vehicles and cause a bloodbath in Marseille in France 98 or Italia 90 and so on and so forth, or in some of the club matches. But when it comes to open criminality, that's not even officially state sanctioned by the Israeli government, these thugs are essentially lauded as victims of anti-Semitism, and you've got an entire, Netanyahu stating he's ready to get a plane to come and pick up these bastards that have caused this kind of hateful fest in the streets of Amsterdam. How does one explain? I mean, it's difficult to understand this.
First of all, can I just say that English fans are not like that anymore? And when they turn around and said that England fans were this, that, and the other, when you compare them to the actual number of people that go to football matches, they're a tiny, small percentage of people. And that's been cleared up and cleaned up. Those people that used to go around, like the ICF, used to go, called the Intercity firm for West Ham, that used to travel to go and have fights. That doesn't happen anymore. And if it does happen, it's between clubs that really properly hate each other, but it's tiny amounts, and the police are on top of it. So that I just want to say that English football hooliganism is not what it used to be, and I'm glad that it's been dealt with. We live in a society where we've got more cameras per person per head than anywhere else in the world, so it's hard work to get away with that level of violence. But also I think that it's changed. It's a lot more family focused in England. As far as these people are concerned, listen, no one that saw what they were saying, where's the effect of there's no schools anymore because there's no more kids in Gaza. They turned around and said you should let the IDF continue and finish the job. They're literally saying genocidal things, and what happened to them was not enough. I wish they'd got more people beaten up. I wish every single one of them that chanted those words of there's no more children in Gaza, let the IDF kill them more. I'd like every single one of them to suffer the consequences of those words. Because
I second that, Ali.
And you're literally talking about the genocide of children. You're laughing and singing about it and encouraging that your security services should be allowed to continue to do that. Now, they're not victims. There's no one in the world that thought they're victims. Every single person, including the King of Holland, who made a comment of, oh, I can't believe this anti-Semitic, this, that, and the other, has been made to look an absolute fool. They look like idiots. Every single one of them looks like an idiot because everyone can see what they were saying. Everyone can see what they did. They went and took a flag down. They took, like the taxi driver as a Moroccan, they smashed his car up, smashed him up. What do you expect people to do? Just stand there and go, oh, it's Israel, let them carry on? No. And to be honest with you, I don't know if that was just football fans or whether it was a special operation to cause problems, but it's backfired. They don't look like victims. And anywhere any Israeli goes now, as a football fan, I promise you, there's going to be people waiting for them.
Indeed.
And rightly so, because these people, if they open their mouth up about Gaza, about this, that, and the other, they're going to get their mouth filled in for them. And rightly so, because you can't behave. You think in your country you can say those things and it's genocidal, and you can say those things because everyone enjoys being genocidal towards the children of Gaza? You can't do that shit in France, mate.
Yes, so sorry for the interruption, but just so I don't lose my train of thought, it seems then that the establishment, whether it's a British establishment, the Dutch establishment, which was quite clear, even the mayor came out, seems to have then kind of inverted the reality to depict the genocidal state as an innocent victim and the hooliganism as innocence, and the Palestinians, and of course the migrants that stood up as basically the guilty party. And for me, I would say the kind of proper understanding or the contextual understanding of that, in terms of where you saw the police treating the Israeli hooligans with kid gloves, and the politicians and the media recast the villains as victims.
That's why
it doesn't seem to be happening by accident. Because do you see that possibly as a kind of a cynical, in a sense, cultivation by the West, as in parts of Europe in the 1930s, where some people are now categorized as subhuman, and those who are categorizing the individuals as subhuman are flipping the narrative by suggesting that, look, they are the victims. The Israelis are the victims. And must be rounded up and disappeared. This is what is disturbing, is that the dark days of Europe are back on us, and it's not anti-Semitism. It's basically Islamophobia. It's anti-Palestinian hatred. It's right-wing fascism. And it's just because of the West, and the Western governments are just ready to embrace this anti-Muslim bigotry, Israel's hate. And day by day, we inch closer to this kind of renewed pogroms. But it's not pogroms of Jewish people. It's pogroms against, brown people, against Palestinians, against Muslims, against the non-Westerners, against immigrants and poor communities.
Yeah, I have to make this the last answer, because I've got to go. I'll just say that the word pogrom is a very powerful word, and it definitely wasn't a pogrom against them, and it definitely isn't a pogrom against us either. A pogrom is a horrendous thing that happens. So, and as far as the Israelis and everything else, I'm not alone in thinking that this whole operation was something that maybe was put in place for a reason, to get the reaction it's got. And it's maybe to detract people from what they're doing in northern Gaza, because northern Gaza right now is day 35 of a full siege with no food, no water, no nothing being brought in. Okay. And the Israeli forces have been told by the American government, by the American administration, if you don't let in food and water, if you don't let that in right now, we're going to stop giving you equipment and military aid. They basically got the press in. The press was there to see the at the areas crossing, food, water, and this and the other. And once the press had left, the lorries were stopped. So they made it look like they're going in, but because there's reporters inside there saying, like, where's that stuff? It's supposed to be coming through. It didn't come through. And the Americans now know that this happened, and guess what? They're not implementing what they said. So we do not live in a very just world when it comes to this situation. Gents, I love you both. Thank you very much. But I have to go. I'm at a friend's house, and I'm doing this as on the fly with you guys.
Appreciate that.
And I kept saying, Yusuf, it's an absolute pleasure. Mo, it's an absolute pleasure as well. Okay.
Welcome. See you soon.
Hope
Take care.
Catch you again, Oz. Great to have
Inshallah.
you.
I hope to speak to you soon, guys. Have a good one. Have a good day. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Wow, that's a fantastic insight. Also, picking Hozzy's brains, and some of the information that he had is very, very valuable. Also, we've got another member of the Workers' Party backstage. And to be honest, brothers and sisters, I do realize, and I am a part of the Workers' Party officially now, and I do feel sincerely that these individuals who are members of the Workers' Party are very vocal, especially when it comes to the situation in Palestine and oppression all over the world. If you want to show your support to the Workers' Party, I have put the link in the chat. There it is. If you're in the UK, if you want to be a member of the Workers' Party, it's roughly about £5 a month, and they will send you some more information. Or if you want to make a donation, you can. Or if you want to read up a bit more about the Workers' Party, that's the best place to go, directly onto the website. Brother Yusuf,
could I say a thing? Could I say a thing, Brother Mohammed, on that? I'm not a Britisher, I'm South African, but if I was in the United Kingdom, that would certainly be a party that I would support. And so I second Brother Mohammed. I encourage viewers to register, join up to those who speak for you, who speak for the downtrodden, for the needy, support the Workers' Party. And I say this as someone that cannot vote in the United Kingdom, and I have no dog in this race.
Yeah, Brother Yusuf, we've got one more guest backstage, Brother Adam. He's been patiently waiting. I'll bring him onto the stage, and I think he's got some things to mention.
Sure.
I'll bring him on now. Adam, thank you for your patience. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Adam.
Well, thanks ever so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure to see my party colleague Hoz there really getting into his stride. And I think that emphasizes, as Brother Yusuf said, that this really is the party that stands for what is right. And if our government and our potential government in waiting, i.e. the Labour and the Tories, can't stand up for something or stand against something so horrific as is what is happening in the Middle East at the moment, well, can they be trusted to run a country? I wouldn't trust them to run a second-hand shoe store. But to pick up on a few of the points that have been raised, this is all very interesting, the events with the football match in the Netherlands. And Israel, once again, have a habit of confusing attack with self-defense, and they think they're getting away with it. I have two friends in the Netherlands who are actually present at the Ajax match, and they have verified that the Ajax fans were all there, peaceful. There were pro-Palestinian demonstrations there, all peaceful. And then the Maccabi fans kicked off, and the Dutch acted in self-defense.
It'll be interesting when they go to France, like Brother Yusuf mentioned. I know the situation in France is going to be, I think, a bit more hostile towards those type of supporters due to the fact that the high concentration of Muslims who actually live in France. How do you feel, Brother Yusuf and Brother Adam, regarding the outcome in France? And of course, it's coming closer to home, coming closer to the UK. Will there be a possibility of this particular team playing one of the British or the English teams here in the UK?
Well, I don't know. I don't follow the Nations League. I mean, I barely follow the Nations League, but I believe it's a new competition amongst the series of expanding tournaments that are being just bloated by UEFA and FIFA. I do think that security will be extremely tight tomorrow. I know there's a game tomorrow evening at the Stade de France. Certainly the Muslim presence is far more in France than in Holland. There's a larger presence. There's a larger presence of both immigrants and local French Muslims. I think there will be a far more tightening of French security. But bearing in mind, I mean, I think it was about last week where French diplomats were arrested in Tel Aviv. I don't know if you were familiar with that particular report. What essentially happened was that, if I could just basically open up the report. So there's a strained relationship at this particular juncture, where there was some sort of diplomatic incident in Jerusalem. I think it was last week Friday. France's foreign ministry has summoned Israel's ambassador on Tuesday, where you had a situation that, and this is last week Tuesday, where Israeli security forces, during a visit to Jerusalem, just simply went into the given compound, and they apparently assaulted the Israeli police. They went into the French consulate and they assaulted, and they arrested a French officer that was nearby the Jerusalem church. They forced themselves in. There was a spat. There was some sort of conflict that basically happened. I think that essential strain that existed and that conflict, emerges from previous weeks' calls by Macron to actually call for an arms embargo, which he hasn't implemented yet. But that arms embargo, which was called by Macron, seems to have kind of prompted some sort of backlash from Netanyahu and the Israeli regime. And so the French Foreign Ministry, they claimed that they had summoned the Israeli ambassador in protest in terms of what had basically happened. Essentially, these security forces, Israeli security forces, they entered this particular area, and they, in fact, they detained 2 staff members at the French consulate without any reason. And despite the fact that these individuals have got diplomatic status, and they were only released after the French foreign minister basically got involved. He then went to the area in Jerusalem during his visit in Jerusalem and then intervened, and then these 2 diplomats were released. So basically there seems to be a tension existing between France and Israel at this particular juncture.
Was this before Netanyahu's government put out a statement saying that Israelis should refrain from attending sporting and cultural events in the Netherlands, the UK, Belgium, and France?
This was on the 7th of November. In fact, if I may just open this article here.
This was Monday. This statement went out, so it's newer than this.
So the incident at the mission at the consulate was on the. Let me just try and see. This was on the 7th of November. Here we are. I've got the Associated Press report, Brother Muhammad, if you can share it. Yeah, this was a spat between Israeli police and the French consulate staff at a Jerusalem church. This was a French-owned church compound. In fact, just to correct me, in the city of Jerusalem, French Foreign Ministry briefly detained 2 consulate employees. Now, if you see the video footage of it, you see the actual physical shoving of these 2 employees. They pushed him aside. So it's clearly an assault that essentially took place. This was last week on the 7th. So it'll be interesting to see what the hosting of the Israeli team in France tomorrow evening will entail. My magic ball, I don't know what's going to basically happen, but there seems to be some sort of strained relationship, and Macron has spoken about having an arms embargo. This is a French foreign minister. He intervened. He was speaking to the journalists at that particular time, and after his intervention, they then released these 2 diplomats. So things don't look too good there between France and Israel. And one needs to bear in mind that France has had for some time, and still presently has an increasingly large growing population of North Africans, of Arabs, of Muslims. So, these individuals are slowly becoming a far more formidable force. Although France has been Islamophobic in some of the laws that it's passed and its legislations in terms of dress code of Muslim women and so on. But I do believe that this has become a far more formidable force. And over time, I believe shaping policy. I do believe that if you had a France that was 50 years or 40 years ago, they would have been highly pro-Israel. This basically gives an indication of some degree of shift. But I don't know what will happen tomorrow evening. So let's just wait and see if the match goes ahead. As many people have called the hypocrisy and duplicitous double standards of FIFA and UEFA, that whilst at the drop of a pin, they easily evicted and kicked out Russia out of FIFA. Although they hosted the 2018 World Cup, they were ineligible to play in 2022 and even now, presently. But Israel is still is a fully fledged member of UEFA, and strictly speaking, it shouldn't, because Israel is not part of Europe per se as such, but it's somehow or the other amalgamated by UEFA, and so when it plays its games, it falls under the cover and the auspices of UEFA. UEFA hasn't kicked them out. FIFA has not kicked out Israel. It's unlikely that they will make any major tournament, but from a principal point of view, it shows possibly the inherent fear that despite the devastation and the genocide and the sanguinary mass murder that has been committed by the Israeli regime, they're still being handled by kid gloves by these international sporting bodies and international institutions. Whereas in the case of Russia, which has done far less. In fact, up to now, in the Ukraine-Russian war, 15,000 people have been killed. Up to now, only 15. And I don't say this in a loose sense, but only 15,000 people have been killed. According to the Lancet report, not the Gaza Ministry of Health, which people so often castigate as a Hamas-run propagandist Ministry of Health, but according to the Lancet Medical Journal, close to 100,000 people have been murdered by the Israeli regime, either directly through carpet bombing or deliberate killings, or alternatively through consequential suffering and damage, and of course the total leveling of the fields of Gaza, where people are dead and rotting under the rubble, for them to being eaten by dogs and cats. So that's a reality of the situation in terms of what we have.
Yeah, I did put up the latest figures so far. The Ministry of Health in Gaza are saying over.
And that's a conservative estimate. That's a conservative estimate, yeah.
Yeah. So as you can see, well over 43,000 people have been massacred. Majority of them, as you can see, nearly touching up to 17,000 are children. Injured-wise, it's shocking. It's just going to be no medical care there now. Right now, there's no hospitals in full function, and also the fact that possibly more than 10,000 people still missing. It's really heartbreaking
and that figure sadly could be double that. How can you count people that you can't even get food aid to?
Absolutely.
Here's a report here by the Lancet has reported here. This is the Lancet Gaza death toll. This was as covered by Al Jazeera, and this was now, not even now. In fact, if I look at the date, this was in July 2024. We're now sitting in November 13th. In July 2024. The Lancet Medical Journal did a study, and they looked at other factors, quantified diseases, and of course the damages. They state the figures could be something close to 186,000, now probably sitting in excess of 200,000. So even this figure, which people castigate as being too high, which is the Gaza Ministry of Health, 43,000, as you mentioned, may be a figure that's actually too low and too conservative by common estimates, by actual estimates. In reality, when you look and tie it up with other organizations that basically are better equipped to do a far more effective assessment in terms of what the actual figures are. And that basically would amount to 8% of Gaza's pre-war population. 8%. I mean, this is insane. This hasn't been challenged. This hasn't been challenged at any stage. So this is the reality of what we are talking about. And people need to realize, because we've had many people and apologists coming on this program about the consequential effects of the fact that the main aim is just simply to get Hamas, and these are just simply accidental deaths. From a logical point of view, you cannot make the argument without being ridiculed that 43,000 people could be accidentally killed. But we now see the reality of the situation, that is not even the case. We've played many reports, from the beginning of this genocide last year through to January and February, through to the deaths of Hind Rajab, through to recent times, burning of people, where dead children are being found on either crushed to death, or where they are being treated. They've got their bodies are being brought in by their parents to the hospital, and they've got bullet wounds to the head. So this is systematic targeting, systematic killing. I mean, if you take into account all the lies that was told about Hamas on October 7th, there's not one single baby that has had a bullet wound to his head or that was murdered in the fashion that Israeli did. Look at all the facts and figures that you've got on the ground. Burning of babies and burning of adults and children wholesale that they accused Hamas of doing. It was found to be a fabrication. The organization that promoted that propagandist lie, Zaka, whose founder was a notorious pedophile, that was found to be fabricated. But the opposite has happened. Israel has burned children and babies, and we've seen the images in real time. We've never seen those images on October 7th. Rape. There's no evidence of a single eyewitness testimony of rape that happened on October 7th. Contrary-wise, we've now seen footage and images of Palestinian detainees being raped by Israeli soldiers. And when those soldiers are being arrested, you have a situation where those particular, there's a protest to have the right to commit rape, and where Israeli politicians within the administrative Knesset and far-right politicians have stated that, look, this is a right. B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights organization, pointed out that this is a reality. Beheading of babies. No evidence of beheading of babies, but we've seen Palestinian babies being beheaded and blown apart and torn up. We've seen the real images. So as we've mentioned, as many people better than us have mentioned, that every single accusation that they make is in reality a confession. And just like you see the crescendo at the football match, they are the instigators, they are the racists, they are the genocidal maniacs supporting the worst kind of violence and instigating violence. And then they make out themselves to be the victims, and that they're these poor, innocent, benign, benevolent football fans that are just innocently going to a football match and doing nothing wrong and being systematically targeted through anti-Jewish hate pogroms. Rubbish. So this is
again,
the reality.
It comes round to the thing of Israel having this habit of confusing attack and self-defense. But it goes further than that. And I see it all the time when I speak to people, and people, they confuse cause and effect. They confuse ends and means. People will look at the effect and they'll say, oh, mass immigration. Well, look at the cause. It's imperialism and participation in foreign conflicts. People say, oh, yeah, Hamas and Palestine support is the same. No, supporting the Palestinian people and supporting Hamas are different things. The means and the ends. Yes, Hamas generally have chosen what's portrayed to be violent means. There's the rest of us that are championing peaceful protest and raising awareness. And I'm so worried about what's happened recently by Israel putting out a statement saying they have intelligence on anti-Semitic attacks happening in the Netherlands, the UK, Belgium, and France, that I've put a very public statement on Twitter, X, saying, I don't support Hamas. I support Palestine. Anti-Zionist is not anti-Semitic. Put it out there, because otherwise, like the police officer in Gloucestershire, who apparently has been suspended from duties and arrested for his alleged support of Hamas. Who are they coming for next?
I want to share this.
Go ahead, Yusuf. Go on.
Yeah, no, there was an individual that I want to share the screen. It'll be just a 2-minute video of I don't know where this happened, whether it was in the inner cities of or London, but this was, I think, last week, 9 days ago. If I could, can you share the screen? Do we have it there on the screen?
Yeah, I've just got to be careful if you play it, just in case if I get another strike. That's the problem.
I did see that.
They want to talk.
Here we are.
It's okay, it's fine.
Oh, it's in London.
We're going to speak to him over here. What have I done? We're going to speak to him over here.
Not on his own.
CN 1982.
This is a professor.
And CN 2436.
Right, guys. Yeah, we're just going to have a conversation.
Chrissy, can we? They want to talk to him. Him.
It's like being in Israel here.
So what?
I don't know, but he's not going to go alone.
81.
So, you have made a speech. So you are on
Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ.
What was the hate
Against what?
Not in this demonstration.
Crazy.
You don't have to say anything, but no harm, no defence, freedom of mention, question, something which
Crazy. You're crazy.
you say may be giving evidence. I don't understand why you're stopping this.
You need to tell him what he's alleged to have said.
So if we can just come out of the way, we're going to go.
What is he alleged to have said?
Have you arrested him, mate?
What is he
You'll take him away.
What is he alleged to have said? What has he said? What has he said? You may have the wrong person.
We don't have to
You may have the wrong individual.
stand back, please. Look, guys, just stand across here so that he can go.
Shame on you!
Stand across
You're
here.
arresting a Jewish man! You're arresting a Jewish man! Shame!
So this was a Jewish man. He's an Israeli academic, Israeli UK academic, Haim Brisheth. I don't know who he is, but this was at a pro-Palestine Palestine march, and he actually gave a speech. And I mean, he's a harmless individual, and the police arrested him. I mean, you know, the traditional idea of the British bobbies that we used to see in the naughty books, I mean, no longer exists. This is like V for Vendetta. If you're familiar with the movie by the Wachowski brothers, where there's this dystopian future of British society, that's basically what we're seeing before our very eyes, not just in United Kingdom, in Europe. It's like you can't speak out. And we've never experienced this. So I wonder how it is that you go about and are cautious to say what you can say. And there's no freedom of speech. There's a lack of freedom of speech, lack of expression. But that's just one example of what I see. And it's many people that are happening. It's happening to so many people out there that you go out there. And I just thought I'd just share it with you. I don't know if you're familiar with him, Adam and Brother Muhammad. This is Israeli.
Yeah, I watched that about half a dozen times on repeat when I first saw it. And I was so enraged by that. And then I've also seen more recent stuff. And I think, who's going to get the knock on the door next? Is it going to be my door? Is it going to be Brother Mohammed's? Is it going to be George Galloway's? Is it going to be Hoz? Or any number of people that stand with us in just trying to highlight these atrocities. Yes, they seem to be going for the more prominent people like Richard Medhurst and so on, but who next?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very strange and weird times that we actually are living in right now. We've got about 10 minutes left to end the show. I have put the link in the chat. If anybody's got some opposing thoughts or opinions, feel free to come on and possibly even challenge Brother Yusuf or Brother Adam on some of the statements that they've made. The link has been pinned and it has been posted. So all I request for you to come on and join the stream is to put your camera on. Previously in the past, we've had people come on and they don't want to show their face and leave rude and disgusting remarks in the private chat and then scarper off like little children. If there's anybody willing to show their face, come on and oppose or even have a different thought process, worldview, feel free to come on. We've got about 10 minutes or so, so feel free to come on. Recently, I heard this particular ruling of 100 days. The American government or the state administration gave the Israeli army 100 days. Can you just break this down? And how would they implement this 100 days type of condition that they put upon the IDF? Can you break it down for us, Brother Yusuf, and of course, Brother Adam?
I haven't read about that, but I think what you're talking about is the ultimatum that's basically being given by the U.S. government or the incoming Trump administration. I don't think the Trump administration has given anything, but I think the United States administration may have possibly given an ultimatum. But they've been giving ultimatums from the beginning of this year. And it's been feckless. It's been fallen on dead ears. I mean, I've seen the news reports by Anthony Blinken and Matthew Miller, and you know what is remarkable. I've seen images. You've seen those videos where even after, for example, we had these infamous incidents of the murder of the little 5-year-old girl, Hind Rajab, where someone like Matthew Miller is stating that the United States government are attempting to investigate it, whereas the Israeli government has already stated that from the Israeli point of view, they did absolutely nothing wrong. Or when they killed their own civilians or hostages, they did nothing wrong. Or when they engaged in the Flower Massacre and shot people dead in the head, they claimed it was a stampede, and the report shows that they did nothing wrong. Or when you had systematic situations where children were targeted, they were killed, or people leaving hospitals were targeted and shot dead, and then you had the bulldozers going and trampling over them. They've done their own internal assessments, and they found they did nothing wrong. And yet you find the United States administration has been making constant and ongoing apologetic motifs to defend this kind of savagery, barbarism, and satanic behavior. So I don't know what ultimatum they are giving. I don't know, honestly, if they have given. I haven't seen that specific one, but I do understand that they've mentioned that they would like the war to end in principle. But although it's a feckless, empty gesture, if you see these news reports, if you see some of these news reports that are being held out there and some of these press briefings that basically essentially happen, you will see on and on how essentially Matthew Miller or Anthony Blinken, or for that particular matter, that Indian guy, I forget his name, are always basically defending Israel at every single turn, at every juncture. Matthew Miller, as an example, about 7 months ago, was asked what's the logic behind the United States sending 2,000-pound bombs to Israel if the rationale was just simply self-defense. I mean, he had absolutely no answer. He says Israel's security is much in need. He was then questioned by, I think, if it's not Max Blumenthal or somebody, whether killing babies is okay. In relation to the so-called retaliatory strikes more than a year ago, Miller made a particular example that there's nothing wrong with this. He was asked about the pages where civilians were killed, where their own particular former CIA head George Tenet said was an act of terrorism. They were questioned. The White House press secretary questioned, was this an act of terrorism? They just simply wouldn't basically concede the point. So I don't know. I mean, the thing is, the United States could pick up a call. I think Ronald Reagan did this with Menachem Begin During the Lebanon War of 82. He picked up the phone and said things need to stop, and they stopped. Begin had a background. He had a history coming from the gangs of Irgun and Stern, and they stopped. So all the United States, all this geriatric senile fool needed to do, or get his handlers to do, was pick up the phone and tell Netanyahu to stop. Because essentially it's very much...
I can't see that happening, Yusuf. I actually think they've got leverage over the British and the American government, peoples of state. I think Epstein Island and other Mossad ideas of some of these politicians and famous people have been caught with their pants down, literally. And just the same situation with this rapper, P. Diddy. I think there is a lot of sexual behaviors that have been recorded or images. And this is why I actually strongly feel, after hearing the discussion on Piers Morgan the other day, I forgot the young man's name now. He has been all over X right now and all over social media for standing up. Even though he's a non-Muslim, he's talking.
Are you talking about Dan? Are you talking about Dan Bilzerian?
Yes.
Dan Bilzerian. I haven't seen the whole interview. I think, I don't know what to say about Piers Morgan. He's a sucker for a beating at every single program. But I've seen clips of that. I haven't seen the interview by Dan Bilzerian. But that's available on Piers Morgan Uncensored. But this was what I wanted to share with you. This was this character, Matthew Miller. It's a short, I think it's about a few seconds, just to give an example of how these individuals respond. Have a look at this. Just listen to what he said.
When you mentioned the West Bank parts, the Israeli newspaper reported recently on Israeli snipers killing 7 innocent bystanders in the Jenin refugee camp, which is, of course, to say not Gaza. The dead included 2 teenagers and reportedly the director of the government hospital surgical ward. So these are soldiers putting 7 people into their lens, sniping them. They have the moment to see who these people are. It's in the West Bank. What's the explanation for this?
So I can't give you a good explanation. You should ask the government of Israel for an explanation. I would say that in any kind of incident like that, what ought to happen is that there ought to be an investigation. Israel ought to conduct an investigation. If it's IDF soldiers, the IDF ought to conduct the investigation. If it's INP, it ought to be the INP that conducts an investigation. If there is, if they find wrongdoing, there ought to be full accountability and full transparency.
Has the U.S. communicated with Israel on this issue at all?
I'd have to check to see if we've raised a specific incident, but that is our broad expectation when it comes to any of these types of incidents.
And then on your...
So, I mean, you can see this, and I mean, it's even shameless, and I don't want to play it now because of the time limitation about his response to Hind Rajab and where they've accepted that particular report, because I just want to place it for you that the Hind Rajab finding, they found that the Israeli soldiers were not culpable. You know, although 335 bullets were drilled into that poor girl and into the vehicle in which she was, they found that they were not culpable, and they've accepted it. So, yeah, you're right. At some point, there's leverage. There's the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee. There's the politicians that are receiving pay. There's this kind of adulation. I mean, when Netanyahu was at Congress, you saw it was like idolatry in real time. It's like the Pharaoh comes and the Egyptian slaves are just basically infatuated by him. There was a kind of an infatuation.
Brother Yusuf. It's like
absolutely satanic,
devilish
satanic
behavior. And I definitely feel, I've listened to a particular podcaster called Candace Owens, who's really gone into depth regarding Kamala Harris and her background and how she was linked with the Freemasons and Zionism, and how she was related to some of the presidents of the past, such as the Bush family, how Barack Obama is related to Brad Pitt, and how Hollywood and presidency seems to be hand in hand, and how Mossad played in the situation with Bill Clinton. I again feel that this particular affair that he had was planned by Mossad just to catch him out, because he was not playing by their rules. And there's so much conspiracy theories, and I'm not really holding my breath, but I do think some of these conspiracy theories are playing out right now. I do feel the Mossad agencies have got some type of dirt on some of these politicians. Otherwise, why don't they speak out? I'd love to get Adam's thought on that. Being here in the UK, we see David Lammy. I was shocked by some of his statements. How did that come across? I know the Workers' Party of Britain was gobsmacked and kind of did some memes regarding David Lammy.
Yeah, because they're he, like most of them, they're already bought and paid for by Israel and Israeli sympathizers. And if they're not, their bosses are. And that stops them climbing the greasy pole of politics. So that really comes as no surprise. But David Lammy, honestly, he is not fit to be a member of parliament, let alone local councillor, let alone foreign secretary. The first foreign visit he did upon becoming foreign secretary was to go over to Israel and get a photo shoot with Benjamin Netanyahu. If he'd got the slightest modicum of thinking that there might be a few people that might or may not vote for him and his party in the future, that maybe that might be a bad call, no, completely misread the room.
Good point here by Mark. I do strongly feel there is some connection. There is definitely some dirt. Brother Yusuf, I know how, being from South Africa and the apartheid era, were there people who committed those crimes, especially from the white so-called transgressors. Were there any kind of like payback or some arrests made after apartheid ended? What happened with these so-called? Did they seem to leave the land and migrate to different parts of the world? Were they any arrests made? Any convictions?
No, there was actually none. There's an interesting documentary for British folk. You had one of your own, although he's not British, he was Australian, who did a remarkable documentary on that very issue. This was more than 20 years ago in 1997, about 4 years after democracy. The documentary was called Apartheid Did Not Die. And the journalist was the Australian British journalist John Pilger. Remarkable documentary, which I believe is available on YouTube. What happened after 1994 was that South Africa enacted what they called, or what they wanted to do, was a period of reconciliation. A period of reconciliation in terms of which there was this new transition. The ANC government had basically come to power. Everybody was given the particular vote. But our first deputy president was the apartheid era president, F.W. de Klerk, the first apartheid era, or the second apartheid era president, F.W. de Klerk. Before that, there were prime ministers. So what they did after 1994 was that in 1996, there was a court-like restorative justice body assembled in South Africa after, which was authorized by Nelson Mandela and chaired by Desmond Tutu, remarkable Desmond Tutu. It was called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC. And what the commission did was that it invited witnesses who were identified as victims of these grotesque human rights violations to give statements about their experiences. And, they selected some for public hearings. And what happened is that the perpetrators of the violence were also allowed to give testimony and request for amnesty from both civil and criminal prosecution. And there were a high number of individuals, a high number of figures, and they investigated human rights abuses from 1960 to 1994. And the whole aim was to kind of reestablish, proposals for restoring the victim's dignity and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, what you see is a situation is that even though the commission found that there were close to about 10,000 political deaths under apartheid between at least the 40s, 1948 and 1989, and more than 20,000 were as a result of human rights violations, none of them were actually criminally prosecuted. None of them. I mean, there were a few, like I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Dirk Coetzee was a police officer. I can't recall. But, in reality, the hearings, and there's negatives and there's positives that come out of it, but the hearings were kind of a way to say, let the past be the past and let's move on. That was essentially what it was. But there was no actual kind of Nuremberg trial inquiries where people were essentially prosecuted and criminally convicted. In fact, there has not been a single conviction of anyone within the apartheid regime at its actual primary level. In fact, a lot of them are probably dead by now, that was in fact actually convicted. A lot of those that were in fact kept, and to a certain extent, if my memory serves me correct, up to recently were kept in custody and were in jails, were actual resistance fighters. The ANC had an organization called MK, which is Umkhonto we Sizwe, the Spear, and they were involved in bombing campaigns and in certain instances even necklacing. Necklacing is the idea which is very common in our townships. We lived in a violent area where they would take a tire, the community would take a tire, put oil in the tire and set you alight. So you would essentially be burnt alive whilst walking, and you can't move. You are tied to a lamppost, and so you basically burnt alive standing up. So there were atrocities that were being committed at that level. There were one or two individuals that may have been prosecuted for that. But insofar as the engine of the apartheid system and regime is concerned, Not a single individual basically was in fact prosecuted. And I think the remarkable thing that has been made over the years in the critique against the South African government is that they did too little. And someone like John Pilger and Naomi Klein and Naomi Wolf, as an example, would make the argument that whilst the outer facades of apartheid were essentially done away with, the idea of separate beaches and separate schools. I couldn't go to a white school and so on and so forth. That was all done away with at a very peripheral level. But the economic underpinnings of apartheid, in the sense that South Africa did away with the outer frills, but they embraced the kind of neoliberal global apartheid where the poor become poorer and the rich get richer. So, that's the reality of the situation. And we could have a debate with and discussion with far more competent individuals that have studied this history in detail and in depth, and that can give you a good assessment on the situation. But for those who are interested really in terms of how the transition took place and what really happened, there's an old documentary done by John Pilger, which is available on YouTube. It's called Apartheid Did Not Die. It's 4 years after the 1994 elections, but it's as relevant today as it was when it first came out in 1997. In fact, it was shown only once on South African television, and it was shown once in the UK on a channel called ITV, and it was never shown again. But it's available on YouTube for people to see it, and it gives, in my opinion, one of the best assessments in terms of what the transition really meant. And of course, to a certain extent, one could make the argument that the South African government, the black government, was set up for failure because the mines, we've got some of the richest mineral wealth in the world, yet all our mining companies are, the sales offices and the mining headquarters are in Europe, controlled by European companies. You couldn't make this up. Anglo Gold, Ashanti, and De Beers, and all of that, the wealth of South Africa do not belong to the South African people. The land of South Africa, the arable land at the very least, is owned by and large by corporates, and a lot of them foreign multinationals that have incentives. You've got companies like Monsanto, for example, that are so there's a lot to discuss on that particular issue, and that's another discussion we must have sometime in the future in relation to that. But it's fascinating in terms of how you move from one aspect, you do away with one form of tyranny just to enter and embrace another tyranny. And if there is ever a one-state solution in Israel, which is the only way forward, not a two-state solution, the pitfalls that South Africa fell through, it's important that possibly Palestinians who would then be in the majority, and the existing Israelis who would be willing to stay and live on, not fall in that.
That's going to be my next question. We're going to finish off on this. This is going to be actually perfect way to end the show. I'm not. This is just a statement, guys. I don't want anybody to clip this or says that Mohammed believes in fortune telling or anything like that. If you had a crystal ball, how do you think right now the situation in Gaza will play out? How do you perceive it, brother Adam? I'll go with you first. How do you feel the end will be? And you can be as open as you like, and you can bring other countries into it, or World War, whatever you feel inside, deep down in your thought process. How do you feel this conflict, especially in Palestine, will end?
The problem is that is rather too dreadful a sort of thought for me to comprehend. I've got a horrible feeling that the way that this will go will not be good. The global community is still continuing to ignore our pleas, as Hos was saying earlier on. He's been screaming, he's been shouting, he's been jumping up and down for way over a year now, and because this goes back so much further, and still nothing seems to be happening. The death toll seems to rise. There doesn't seem to be even really be a way out for most people. They are literally penned in from all sides behind electrified fences, behind gun turrets, razor wire, and this, that, and the other. Aid, food is being denied to them. Disease is running rampant. And I sincerely hope that it doesn't go this way, but there will come a point where people can no longer really exist there. And just saying that now really makes me want to cry.
Yeah, but I want to throw
I hope that is not fulfilled.
I want to add
the way things are going, that's the way I can see it.
Especially the way the Houthis are involved now in Hezbollah are targeting HQ army bases in Israel and Tel Aviv right now. I feel strongly that the Palestinian resistance will never give up. I actually, from day one, Brother Yusuf can quote me on this, that I said this from the beginning, that I actually think the resistance will win. The Israeli army will run out of energy, fuel, they'll take too many losses, and there's only a certain amount the IDF and the propaganda can cover up. Initially, we heard about the 7th of October, we heard about rape, we heard about babies putting in ovens, babies being beheaded, gang rape, torture, and now it's come to pass that all of this was fake. It was all fake. And now the reality is turned upside down, whereas in real time on social media, and the media are portraying the IDF are the ones who are beheading children, burning people alive, raping and massacring innocent people just to hide their crimes. So I can't see the Palestinian people giving up. I actually think it will possibly be a stalemate, and possibly if Iran gets involved in the third wave, I think it will be the end of Israel. I don't think
if Iran gets involved, then that's when things get spicy, shall we say?
Yeah, I think there is.
And if Syria get dragged in, and that drags Russia in,
course.
Well, it is the end of days.
Yeah, I'll say the end of days. I think it'll be stalemate. I think what Brother Yusuf just mentioned, I think it'll be a one-state situation. I think the Palestinians will be a free people, possibly a bigger mass of land, and some type of negotiation between governments. I can't see the IDF winning. I cannot see that happening. They are getting smashed to bits in Lebanon. But of course, the media hides the true figures of the Israeli army losses. And same thing in Gaza. The resistance, come on now, it's been over a year, Brother Adam and Brother Yusuf, over a year now that electric, water, food have been taken away from the people of Palestine, and they have continued to resist. And I can't see the Arab countries. I know that I'm not a big fan of some of these Arab countries. I cannot see them sitting with their hands tied anymore. I think they will help out in one way or another. Brother Yusuf, same question to you. I'm sorry I went into a monologue. How do you see all this playing out in the near future?
Yeah, as Muslims within Islam, and our role is always to be inclusive to other communities and groups and nations and those who are oppressed. And the one thing that we should not be is hopelessly pessimistic. In fact, we do get pessimistic. We all get pessimistic, but it's basically an un-Islamic trope to become pessimistic. We always need to have hope. Even in the advent of the earlier prophets, they were never pessimistic. They never gave up. You know the story of Yunus, Jonah, and the Prophet Muhammad at his worst of times. They were never pessimistic. They always had hope. There was a famous incident, to paraphrase, at the cave of Thawr, when the pagan Quraysh, the oppressors, were going after the Prophet and Abu Bakr, and essentially there was some sort of fear that they would be caught. And the Prophet stated, have no fear, God is with us. And essentially, that is the kind of optimistic worldview in the face of a bleak dystopian world that we should have. The one thing, and you know, in the face of evil, can you see anything positive coming out of it? Well, I came across a post on Facebook, and I posted it on my page, and I shared it with you. If you can just share the screen in relation to that post, this is basically what has happened. In a year, Israel has basically become the most hated country in the world, with the most hateful, cruel, and heartless people the world has ever known. And this was never the case before, but this is now so blatant, so in your face, so open and explicit and inhuman and evil for the world to see, that essentially, you know, to deny this would be basically to live in a fictional world of fairy tale and fantasy. The reality of the situation is that Israel has become a pariah, a global pariah. And despite all the desperation of these hopeless media corporate apologists and the political leaders, and of course their fan bases and the corporate media that backs them, despite all the efforts, despite all the propagandist tropes and talking points and media stereotypes that they wish to come and portray and put forth out there, they're still not winning. They're still losing. They've lost the propaganda war. And just like South Africa once upon a time became a pariah state to the extent that the world could no longer deny the reality of what has happened. Well, I'll tell you something. In South Africa, in South African society, at the heights of apartheid, we never ever had a situation that the South African government would go into black townships with helicopter gunships and flatten societies and blow up villages and blow up communities. We've reached such a stage of evil that even the evil that was basically envisaged and manifest during the heights of apartheid was nowhere near, or is nowhere near, to what Israel has enacted over the past several decades, and certainly what we've seen over the past couple of months. So I don't know. I can't predict what the future will hold. It's quite clear that, as many analysts have pointed out, as many people like Yura Island and many of the hardcore Israeli right-wing have pointed out, even someone like Yoav Gallant, who's been fired, who's been the Ministry of Defense, has been fired by Netanyahu. What does that tell you? That this is a war that they can never win. It's a perpetual war. It's a perpetual cycle. It's like living in this time loop of perpetual curse, that this will go on and on until you self-destruct. And the question now is Israel set up for its own particular destruction? And I believe that time may come. I don't know. I can't predict exactly what will happen. But the one thing that has clearly seen, which we've never seen in all history in the past 75 years, is that for the first time in at least since 1950, we've seen a situation where there's been a global shift of opinion within the information world that we live today, and social media and the alternative media and channels like this, and people like the Workers' Party and other groups and movements basically have changed the narrative, have flipped the narrative. You no longer can come out with the propagandist nonsense and hogwash, because people no longer believe this nonsense. And so, just to end on this point, I want to make this other argument, is that I'm a South African. I have, as I mentioned to you earlier, to the viewers out there in the United Kingdom, I'm not supported by the Workers' Party or any other party. I don't get paid by them. I can't even vote in your elections. But I'm calling you, British viewers, go out there. If you want to become politically active, support the Workers' Party. Support them. I'm not a paid patron of the Workers' Party. I'm not being paid to tell this. I don't even have a dog in the race. Support the Workers' Party. Support people like Adam Goodfellow, George Galloway, alternative voices that are powerful and can challenge the narrative of the status quo and the repulsive propaganda we see. Support channels like this. Support the South African Debate Initiative. And in doing so, at the very least, at a limited level, we in our own small way can shift the opinion and reinvent the discourse in a way that is far more ethical, far more moral, and indeed far more humane. So I'd leave it at that.
Thank you, Brother Yusuf. That was well put. Very passionate, very powerful, as always. Thank you for that, Brother Yusuf. And you've been an amazing co-host and an amazing brother and a mentor for me. I really appreciate that. Adam, good fellow, it was really nice to meet you a couple of weeks ago. And I hope we can continue with this relationship and this partnership, and other members of the Workers' Party coming on and sharing their thoughts. Once again, thank you. And of course, our special guest, Haz. It was excellent to get him on, and I think he's off on holiday now. And hopefully when he comes back, we'll get him on. And of course, thank you to all of you out there, the subscribers, the viewers, the members, everybody out there. Father John, Shaz H, Birdsnet Rat Fest, Sister Salika. There's so many people to mention. Of course, our beautiful brother Mahdi. There's so many people to mention, and our sister, I think it's called Chocolate Coffee from Pakistan, Joe Baz, international stage here and audience. So I really appreciate your support. But don't forget, the only request I'm saying is to subscribe to my channel, and of course, Brother Yusuf's channel, South African Debate Initiative, and even the Workers' Party of Britain have got a YouTube channel. So go there, subscribe to the channel, get informed, get the knowledge while you can. There is a discourse taking place here in the UK of some of these podcast channels being banned and being censored. So take this opportunity now, subscribe, like, and share. And also, I have got a Rumble channel. Let me just put that Rumble channel before we end. I do apologize for this, brothers. I just want to, this is my Rumble channel. It's Abu Shuaib. So please, if you've got Rumble, go to Rumble and subscribe to my channel. This is also being live on Rumble. Thank you, Shaz. I really appreciate your support, your supplications. And final words to me is a big thank you to my mentor, my brother Yusuf, and of course my partner in crime, Adam Goodfellow. God willing, we'll meet up soon. This is your brother Muhammad from COVFF. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.